All right, well, we're going to get started. I want to give as much time to our speaker tonight as possible. I'm not going to go into a huge introduction because I will let her do that, but I am extremely excited to hear from Jennifer tonight. I heard that last week was amazing with Mary. So bummed that I missed it, but I think tonight's going to be incredible. I'm super excited to have her share a little bit about her story, and she is just an incredible woman and mom, and she just does everything. So if you would just join me in welcoming Jennifer Heath.
Okay. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for what you have done in my life and what you continue to do and how you're teaching me and growing me, and infuse me with your Holy Spirit so that I can hopefully inspire and challenge and hopefully empower these women to go out tonight living in your supernatural power so that they can really experience the miraculous. Thank you so much for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, excuse me. So I thought before I kind of get into the woman in the Bible that I chose to compare my life to, I would give you a little bit of backstory, first of all. My husband, Jason, and I have been going to this church since 2000, so we've been here for 22 years. And so in some ways, when I was getting ready to prepare this, I'm like, well, everybody kind of already knows me, but there are a lot of new people as well, and I think there are some things that people probably don't know about me, but we have led marriage class and life group and junior Bible quiz and other things. So sometimes, like, when you're in leadership positions, people feel like they know you, even though you don't know the people as much. But I think there might be some things I might share tonight that might surprise you. So, but we have a total of 7 kids, and I'll kind of talk about them a little bit later on tonight. But so I'm going to kind of go through my backstory, just kind of how I grew up, and maybe it'll give you a little insight into why I am the way I am, or why I am the way people perceive that I am. So I was actually born in Billings, Montana, and I was raised in a Christian home. My parents are Dennis and Becky Garrett. My mom is Grandma Becky to all of the young children that she teaches here. And actually, in 1975, David, you can put up, put up the first photo. So this is current. This was at my daughter's wedding, September 16th. So these are some of our kids. They're not all of our kids. Madison and Isaac are on the end. They're married. Our son, Alex, and then my parents are there, and then Jason and I. And then Ashton and Matt just got married, and then that's Matt's parents. And then our son, Tristan, who's 12, and our daughter, Kaylin, who's 15. And then Jason's parents are behind them, and Matt's siblings are next to them. And then show the next photo, David. This was Madison's wedding for 1 second. And, okay, and so the 2 kids, the kids that were missing were Travis, who's in the back there. He's one of our adopted sons. And then Hunter over there on the side, that is my husband's son from his first marriage. So we have a total of 7 kids, and they range in age from 12 to 34. So we kind of have, and it's a pieced together family, as some would call it. So anyway, when I was 2, you can put up photo 4 and then 5. My dad had a really bad accident. My dad owned this company of delivering RC Cola Pop. Don't know if anybody's even heard of that, but they had a really bad accident and were hit by a big dump truck on a highway. And my dad was in the hospital for a couple months and had to have his leg amputated. And I was 2, and my sister was 6 months at the time. So that was a pretty traumatic event. which honestly, as I was preparing this, I was thinking back. At that time, you weren't able to take kids to the ICU. And so my mom said many nights I would be crying like, I want my daddy, I want my daddy. And so to me, I didn't understand why he wasn't there. And I often wondered why I made poor decisions in relationships later in life, but I think that might be one of the reasons. Because trauma that happens to you, which we've learned since adopting, that happens to you before age 5, when your brain is really developing all the neural pathways and things, is more profound and harder to sort of get rid of. And I think a lot of times people don't think, oh, well, they're a baby or they're little, they don't remember it, because I don't remember anything about it. But I definitely had some kind of relational insecurities as I got older. So, but anyway, my parents taught children's church every week at church, and so I got saved when I was 5 at children's church. And when I was 11, I got called to be a nurse. While I was sitting in church. Like, I know that sounds weird, but just like you go to camp and like some people get called to be pastors or missionaries, I got called to be a nurse. I didn't know really anybody that was a nurse. My aunt was a nurse, but I didn't really know her that well or really hear stories about that. I knew from age 11 that's what God called me to do. So I did become a nurse, and I was an emergency room nurse for 20 years. But then, fast forward to 1986, my dad's job transferred him to Minneapolis. So we'd been living in rural Montana, and his job transferred him to Minneapolis, and he had to live here for 9 months before the rest of our family could move because the economy was bad, we couldn't sell our house, and I was 12, so I kind of ran the household while my mom was working and things like that. So you can go to the next photo. So when we moved to Minneapolis, I know this looks really picturesque and pretty and everything, but it's located on 36th and Newton Avenue North in North Minneapolis. And that's where I grew up. So I moved there when I was 13, and I started junior high at Franklin Junior High. And I graduated from Patrick Henry High School, which was 75% minority, which means white people were 25%. So that was a really different experience coming from like rural Montana and then like being planted into North Minneapolis all of a sudden. And I don't think most people know that about me, but that might be some of the reason why I'm maybe as tough as I am. Or maybe why I come across a little too strong sometimes. I had to learn to stick up for myself. So I know this looks really cute, but there were crack houses down the block. My sister, who's 2 years younger than me, had a bedroom on the second floor, and she would have her lights off at night, and then she would look out the bedroom window, and like the next morning we get the lowdown on like who got arrested and who had a domestic and like who was running from police and stuff like that. So we always knew what was going on. And so then, go to the next photo. So then when I turned 16, I needed to get a job. And so I got my first job at KFC on Broadway in North Minneapolis, which this is what it is now. But at the time I worked there, it was Kentucky Fried Chicken. And my parents taught me to have a very strong work ethic, and they said, whatever job you get, you're there for 1 year. Doesn't matter if you like it or not, you're not leaving. So we got robbed twice the year I was there, and I was sticking with it. And and my dad got propositioned by prostitutes while he was waiting to pick me up at night. And actually, the manager, the manager had to go to the hospital one night because he got cracked over the head with one of the food trays and had to get stitches. And he was having an affair with some lady, and he needed somebody responsible to run the store while he was gone. So that was me. So I was a 16-year-old white girl in Broadway, and I had the keys to the safe and everything while he left to go have his affair. And so, then go to the next photo. This was one of my friends. This is me and one of my friends on my soccer team. Her name's Andretta. I graduated in 1991. Now, when I started at Patrick Henry in 9th grade, there was 400 people in our class. Now, when I graduated, there was 132. And that was because that's all the ones who didn't commit suicide or go to jail or get pregnant or have, drop out. And this girl was one of my good friends, and she had a pretty rough life, and my parents actually let her live with us for a little while. She actually ended up having a baby before we got out of school. She was super athletic, like she was over the top. I was white girl trying to play soccer on the team. It was kind of ugly. But anyway, we got our cars broken into. We got our house broken into. One time our house got broken into. That wasn't quite legit. Like we found out that was actually one of my sister's boyfriends that did that, and because he basically only ransacked her room and everything, and when we came in and figured out like her room was the only one that was torn apart and her diaries were gone through and everything, and then he happened to be in the area like when we came home to comfort her, then we were like, okay, Rich, you did that. Like that wasn't cool. So, but probably one of the best things that happened to me going to school there was my Spanish professor. Her name was Senora Crespo. She was from Ecuador, and she was fabulous. And I learned more Spanish in her class, and I got a love for Hispanic people and that culture and learning the language. In fact, I took 2 years of Spanish in college, but I didn't learn as much in college as I did in high school from her. And what I love about God is that he takes like all these pieces of your story and he doesn't waste any of it. And so like I kind of skipped over the part when I was like in first grade. I got to, like my parents didn't have any money, but when I was in first grade, I got to take horseback riding lessons. And that like gave me a love for horses and stuff like that. Well, then I moved to North Minneapolis, and that gave me like a whole other slew of experiences and things. And I feel like these experiences served me well later on because I was able to relate to people that didn't look like me and that didn't, come from suburban white America. And I ended up working for 10 years at HCMC in the emergency room, which I could speak actually a whole night about that. We had dogs in the ceiling one night. That was awesome. Like I was bringing patient back from triage, and I heard all these dogs barking in the ceiling, and the patient was like, "Why do I hear dogs?" And I'm like, "Good question. I'm not sure." But some guy like convinced the police officer that he needed to go to the bathroom without police present, and so he opened the tiles like this in the bathroom, and he went up in there. And Hennepin County is 5 city blocks big, And so he was up in there, and nobody could find him, so they had to send the police dogs after him. And it's night, and I'm thinking he can come down anywhere. Like, he can come down in some patient's room or in a bathroom somewhere or whatever. And so that's why there was dogs on the ceiling. But anyway, there was a lot of exciting stuff happening there. It wasn't a boring job. But, like some of my high school friends were patients there. So I feel like, and even with the Spanish thing, like later on, I got to go on missions trips to Mexico and Argentina and Guatemala, and I got to use my Spanish and my medical stuff on those trips. And I took a medical Spanish class while I was working at HCMC because there's so many Hispanic people, and so I learned how to be able to translate for them while I was working in there. So anyway, then when I turned 18, I'm the oldest child of 3, so I'm pretty independent. So I decided I was wanted to live in a different part of the country, like totally different. So I went to Oklahoma, and I went to nursing school. And you can show the next photo. I graduated nursing school in 1995. And those years were probably some of the best and worst at the same time. And because I did pretty good when I was in nursing school, but I was engaged to a guy right before my senior year in nursing school, I think. And it was one of those situations where you just got this pit in your stomach, like, this isn't going to go well. Like, he was a Christian, technically, but I ended up making, it honestly was probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but I decided to call off the engagement. And it wasn't because I didn't care about him or love him or whatever. It was because I knew, like, this isn't the right decision and God has something different for you. But as a result of that, I didn't meet the person I was supposed to marry in college, and I'd already dated all the guys at the church I was going to. So then I was kind of out of options when I got out of nursing school, because the only other place you can really meet people is at the clubs, and that wasn't really my scene. But I ended up spending a lot of time alone and making a lot of bad decisions, honestly, to the point that at one point I actually, in front of the church, stood up and confessed to them that I was not making good decisions in my relationships, that I was not honoring God, and I should not. I was serving on worship team, and I was teaching Sunday school to like first graders or something, and I just felt really convicted, like I'm not living the kind of character and the kind of qualities that I need to have if I'm going to be in these positions. And so I stood in front of the church and confessed my sin and stepped down from those positions. And honestly, I asked some women in the church to hold me accountable during that time, and I had some agree, but nobody was willing to ask the hard questions. Nobody would say, like, why were you out at that, why did you leave your house at 10 p.m.? Like, or like, why are you with him? He's not a good Christian, or he's not going to be good for you. Nobody would ask me the hard questions. So, Kaylin, that's why I ask hard questions. And actually, I hope you guys will be the kind of women that would be willing to ask the hard questions, because teenagers need that, and young adults. They need somebody who's willing to ask hard questions and go, why are you going there? Why are you doing that? That person is not good for you. So, I know, you can't date forever, so. All right, so go to the next photo. So then I met my husband. I was 24, and Teresa told me I had to share this story, but I met him. This was before the internet. And so, I mean, I know you guys think like, Christian Mingle or whatever, those are like, new. But that's not new. Like, this was 1997, and I was on a dating service. It was a phone line, and you call in, and you, like, leave a message about yourself. So like, his message was, my name is Jason, I'm 6'1", 220 pounds, or whatever, athletic build, and you leave your message. You don't get to see them. You just, leave your message. And so I left my message, and then and then to keep things safe, I didn't give him my phone number. I gave him my pager, because like, pagers used to be for drug dealers, but then they were cool for everybody, so I always had one. And then they didn't have your real phone number. Then it would just like scroll across your thing, and then you could call them if you wanted to, but you didn't have to, And so, so actually, we left messages for each other, and that's how we met. But we met March 27th of 1997, and we got married March 27th of 1998. I had probably, I don't know how many people I dated, probably more than 40, and I went into marriage with a lot of insecurities and a lot of baggage. And though we loved each other, he had been married before and had a 2-year-old son when we met. And so we didn't really have like a honeymoon period. We kind of just went right into dealing with an ex-wife and custody issues, and living in Oklahoma poor as dirt too. That wasn't helpful. So, but I would say we're now 24 years later and 7 kids later, and God has shown himself really, really faithful. So, so the Bible character that I'm going to, talk about or whatever, or that I chose, is Sarah in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis. Now, I'm not sure kind of how she imagined her life to go, but I'm guessing that she probably thought she'd have like a pretty simple life with some children and some goats and sheep and stuff, and grow, like raise her children in around all their family members and stuff. But when she was 65, which, by the way, this is another reason I chose her, because at 65, she was so beautiful that, Abraham had to lie, and he said that she was his sister because he was afraid the king would steal her. So I'm just speaking that over myself. I'm going to be so beautiful at 65. Oh, that's not really the reason at all. But But anyway, at 65, she was still childless, and God spoke to them and said to leave which is where all their family lived, where they had been their whole entire lives, and he didn't tell them where they were going. He just said, get up and go. And the Bible says the next morning Abraham got up and went. And it doesn't say whether Sarah agreed or not, but later on it says that she called him Lord, so she obviously gave her consent, like she went along. And in Hebrews 11, in the chapter where it lists like the heroes of the faith, she is listed there as having believed that God would do something, even though she was past the age of having children and things. So even though she laughed when she heard the angel talking about that to Abraham, she must have still had some level of faith, or God wouldn't have included her in that, Hebrews chapter 11. But, so at 11 years later, so like when she's 76, they kind of gave up hope and decided, I guess the promise isn't coming the way we thought. So they devised the plan to have Abraham sleep with his servant Hagar. And Hagar had a baby, but that was not the promised child that God had promised them. And so it was actually 13 or 14 years later that God actually gave them Isaac. And she was 90, and Abraham was 100 by that time. And I always sit there and think, like, if they would have obeyed the first time, I wonder if they would have had to wait that long, Because there's a lot said throughout the Bible about obedience, and it links with God's blessing and favor and protection. So that's kind of where I want to live, But as a result of God's promise, they got to experience the miraculous, because Isaac became the father of Jacob, who became the father of Joseph, who actually rose to power in a foreign land in Egypt and delivered everyone, the Israelites and really the rest of the world, from famine. And they got to experience the miraculous of Abraham taking Isaac and being willing to offer him as a sacrifice, but God providing an alternate sacrifice. And so as I was thinking, can we experience the miraculous like they did? And if so, how do we get that? Well, it doesn't occur by always having things easy and predictable. I hate to, burst your bubble on that, but I'm going to share some bits and pieces of my story with you today, of how over these 49 years God is developing that kind of faith in me. I am not by any means perfect. There's nothing that I hope you don't come away feeling like I'm in any way saying, like, I got this all figured out. I don't have it all figured out. I just know that God is faithful and that he's done a lot of miraculous things in my life. And I figured if I can share them with you, then maybe it would give you some encouragement to be able to hold on to that for yourself. So number one is remember what he's already done for you, okay? Because that is going to build your faith for future challenges. 2 Corinthians 5:7, the Amplified Version says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight, living our lives in a manner consistent with our confident belief in God's promises." So I want to, under this point, remember what he's already done for you, because it builds your faith for future challenges. I want to quickly run through 3 kind of stories. My parents didn't have much money. Otherwise, we wouldn't have lived in North Minneapolis, because I don't think any parent would really choose to raise their kids there if they had a choice. So I'm sure that they, would have liked if they could have purchased things for us that we needed and things like, not to be like gruesome or anything, but I remember as a preteen one time when I got my period, and my parents couldn't afford just to get feminine products, and my mom had to rip a towel to put in my underwear. Like, we didn't have money. And sometimes we didn't have enough money for food, and we would have to pray for it, and God would provide it. And so my parents, I never felt like they burdened me with their financial issues, but we were aware of them because they included us in praying over those things, which allowed us as kids to experience God coming through on a regular basis, which helped build our faith then for our future. So I don't think that I I'm sure that if you asked them if they would go back and would have rather to have things easier, they probably would have rather to have them easier. But I don't think I would have been able to do some of the things I've been able to do if I wouldn't have grown up having to believe God for things and see God come through on things, because I wouldn't have had the faith to believe for bigger things then. So then I'm going to skip to 1998. Jason and I, when we first got married, we lived in Oklahoma. Our house cost $32,000, and it was on 4 acres, but it was like Native American housing, so it wasn't the best built. So we had scorpions in our house and spiders and stuff, and we had a lot of snakes and stuff on the property. And I remember when God spoke to us both separately about moving up here, back up here to Minnesota to live by my family, and the economy was not very good, so it was going to be hard to sell the house. But through some miraculous things, God sold that house, and we moved up here in 2000. So when we lived with my parents for a little while, because our first townhouse here cost $1,200 a month, and our house payment in Oklahoma was $330 a month. So, okay, go to the next photo. So I remember it was probably 2002, and the economy was really, the housing market was really high, and nothing was staying on the market. And we were trying to find our first house to buy in Minnesota. And all the houses were like selling for, like, they were having bidding wars, and they were going for more than asking price. And, but we had prayed about it, and $199,000 was like our max. Like, that's what we felt like we could do. So this house in Burnsville was $199,000. Now, the thing was, we really didn't have any savings, so we needed the seller to pay the closing costs. And our realtor at the time was not a Christian, and the unusual thing was this house had been on the market for 2 months. I think I know why, because as soon as you went in the front door, there was a Buddha statue. You know, that was like, it was a big Buddha too. And there were just big, like, I don't know, artifacts and things like, you know, all over the place. And so anyway, and plus the carpet was blue, and so were the bathtubs and everything like that. But anyway, but it was on the market for 2 months, which was kind of unheard of. So we wanted to put an offer on it. So we offered full price, $199,000, but we asked for the seller to pay the closing costs. And exactly on the day we put an offer, somebody else put an offer. And so our realtor called us back, and she said, somebody else put an offer. I don't know what it's for, but you should probably, like, go up on your offer. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to, like, pay closing costs or something like that, because nobody's doing that these days. And we said, well, we prayed about it, though, and this is our number. And, like, if God wants us to have this house, then it's going to be for $199,000 with her paying closing costs. And so she called us back a few minutes later, and she goes, well, prayer must work at your house, because that lady, the other offer was for more than what we offered, but she said, I want the family with the little redheaded girl to have this house. And she paid our closing costs. So that was just like one of our stories where we're like, yeah, and it was a 5-bedroom house. We only had one kid at the time. We had only Madison, and she was like 2 or 2.5. But our whole plan from the beginning was God put us in a neighborhood where you can use us and give us a space where we can have people in our home. So we were probably one of the first young adult life groups here, and we've had, I don't know, hundreds of people in our homes probably. And so that home became a really special place where we raised most of our kids. We lived there for 10 years, and we had a lot of people in that house. So it's in Burnsville on South Cross Avenue, and and it's right by this really nice little area in Burnsville that nobody knows around called Loop Road. And it's just one little 1.25-mile loop that has little acreages, and it's really close to where we lived. And so we'd kind of dream, you know, we kind of drive by there and go, wouldn't it be nice, you know, because these houses are really nice and they have little acreages. And remember, I loved horses, and I really wanted to have like a little hobby farm. I'm really not a city girl, so I really wanted to have a little hobby farm for my kids. And so we kind of would drive through there and just dream, like, what if we could live here someday? Well, when we were trying to save money for the hobby farm, I'm not exactly sure. Actually, Derek and Dana might know, but I don't remember when the building pledge started, because I know there was a recession in 2008, and our church went through like a building campaign, and we were supposed to build this addition. Now this was, I'm telling you, it was like 2008, and we pledged $20,000 to that. So that was like, I mean, we were in our young 30s. It wasn't like we were like rolling in the money or something, you know. But we pledged $20,000 to that, and then we had the recession in 2008, and so we weren't caught up with our pledges because we were keeping up with our bills. And there was people left and right that were foreclosing on their houses and losing their jobs and all that kind of stuff happening. And I remember talking to Jason and saying, like, we were starting to not trust the leadership. Our church was going through some hard things, and we were starting to not really trust the leadership. And I'm thinking, I pledged $20,000 to this thing, and I can guarantee you there isn't going to be any addition. And my money is just going to be going to who knows what. And so I was kind of tempted to withdraw our pledge. And it was very clear. God spoke to me. Did you make an oath to the pastor? Did you make an oath to that church, or did you make an oath to me? Because my word says a lot about if you make an oath to me. And I told Jason we need to pay that $20,000 before we do anything else. And so we started paying it down like we were paying debt, like as fast as we could. And go to the next slide. In maybe it was about a year or a year and a half later, we had that paid off. And this house on Loop Road became available for sale. And the lady's kids had lived in this house and rented it out, and they had burned it down because they had too big of a party one night. So it was completely remodeled. It had been totally rebuilt, and nobody had lived in it yet. And Jason's grandmother gifted us enough money for the down payment, which she later, we were planning to pay her back, but she later said we did not need to pay her back. It was a gift. And God gave us this house on Loop Road with 6 acres. And in addition to that, within an 18-month period of time, we had so much excess that we gave away 3 different vehicles. So there was a family in our church that got in an accident, and their van wasn't covered, and we literally had just paid our van off. We didn't even have the title in the mail yet, and God spoke to us like, give them your van. So we gave them our van, said the title's like coming in the mail. We bought another one, and we had it paid off in 6 months. And then another family in our church had something happen, and their car couldn't be repaired. And I talked to my husband, and he's like, you got to be kidding me. We're going to do it again. And I said, I know I'm not just trying to keep giving our stuff away after we just paid it off, but I'm just saying. And so we gave it away, and then like another 6 months, and we did it 3 times. And then God gave us this 6-acre property. And not only that, I can't remember what the details were, but we moved into this house in November of 2011, and we did not close on it until February of 2012. And she let us live in this brand new house rent-free for 4 months. And it stems from one decision. One decision to obey and trust God. Like, you gave me an oath, and it doesn't matter what they do with your money, because it's not yours anyway. And now we have this addition, though. You know, now we were able to finally see that this actually did get to be built. So anyway, that was just kind of some of the miraculous things that God's done for us. Point number 2 is you can do hard things. There's only 2 points. So I'm not going to be like Pastor Derek, like, I got 7 points today. Or I got 4 points on 7 pages or whatever. um, but you can do hard things. Ladies, you can do hard things. I have told my kids so many times, I know that we don't live like other people live, but I don't want to have what other people have. I want my kids to be able to experience the supernatural provision of God, and I want them to experience his power working in them and through them. And you don't get that by staying comfortable. You don't get that by just doing what is easy. You have to get out of your comfort zone, and you have to listen to the voice of God and be willing to step out and do it. And so I remember my mom saying, I worked in the emergency room, like I said, for 20 years, and I would work 12-hour shifts, and I had kids at home, and I would work 3 12s in a row on the weekends, and then I would try to sleep at night, and I'd usually go to her house to sleep because my husband could not keep those kids quiet, I mean, I'm like, I'm trying to sleep here. And so they would always come in and ask me stuff, but I remember by the time I'd get to Sunday, I would have nothing left. And I'm not like working in a department where I don't need to be thinking clear. I'm in the emergency room. I need to be thinking clear. I'm handling critical situations, and I need to be sharp. And I remember her calling my mom, I don't know if I can do it. I'm so tired. I'm not thinking straight. She's like, you have the unfair advantage of the Holy Spirit. Get in there. And so I would get in there, and I cannot count the number of times God would just give supernatural discernment on what was going on with the patient, like the doctors couldn't figure it out or whatever. And so I'm going to tell you a couple hard things we've done. And probably a lot of you, if you haven't been here as long as we have, probably don't know this story. But in 2002, I had my second daughter, Ashton, the redheaded one that was in the most recent wedding photo. And at 9 days old, she started running a fever. And babies aren't supposed to have fevers until they're after 2 months old, because they carry the immune, like their immune system is boosted by their mothers. So they shouldn't run fever, and if they do, you have to do a big workup. You have to do all this blood work. You have to do a lumbar puncture. You have to do all this stuff. So she was 9 days old. She was only 5 pounds, 4 ounces when she was born. So when I took her in to get all this stuff done, it was very traumatic. Like they stuck her like 14 times to get an IV and so many times to get a lumbar puncture and all that stuff. And when I went into the hospital to have her, Travis, my husband's cousin, was staying with us. He's my husband's second cousin. He was 12. And then Jason's son from his first marriage was staying with us too, because it was in the summer. So I went into the hospital having Madison, like I had 1 kid. And then when I came back, I had 4 kids. And the baby was sick. And she actually ended up having a complete duplication of her left urinary collecting system, which means she had 2 ureters that drained her kidney. So she had 1 draining the top half, 1 draining the bottom half. And then she had this huge ureterocele, which is all medical stuff, but it was like a big ballooning out in her bladder. And so she was having kidney infections. And so for the first year or so, she was in and out of the hospital a lot. But Travis was from a very neglectful and abusive situation. And we had met him at like a family reunion in Iowa. And as soon as I met him, I was like, he needs to come live with us. He's living with his great-grandmother. She is living off Social Security. His shoes have holes in them. He's getting made fun of, and his bike tire slashed at school. Like, he has learning disabilities. He doesn't have the supports he needs. And so we would periodically have him, like, come stay with us in the summer. But at this point, his great-grandma that he was living with had a stroke. And so we discussed it, and we discussed it with Travis, and he decided he wanted to come live with us. And I'm like, okay, I got a baby, and she's sick, and I said, give me 6 weeks. I said, I need 6 weeks to adjust to, like, bringing this baby home and stuff, and then you can move in and stay with us. So go to the next slide. So that's Travis. That's my mom and me. I was young. I was only in my late 20s when this happened. And that would actually prove to be the most difficult time that we've had in our life so far. He had a lot of mental health issues. He had learning disabilities, and I was in and out of the hospital with a sick baby, and she had 3 surgeries, I think, in the first year or so. And I couldn't leave him at home, by himself or with my other daughter without supervision and things like that. But nothing really bad happened until he was 16. So he came to live with us when he was 13. When he was 16, our church was taking a youth trip to Argentina, a missions trip. Oh, I need to hurry. And he had raised the money and everything, and he was going on the missions trip. And he was having some trouble with depression, but I felt like if I left him home, he might act out, and Jason was trying to take care of our 2 daughters. And so my mom and I went along on the trip. And while we were in Argentina, he hung himself. And so, and he didn't die, but I got this frantic call from the youth pastor that he had hung himself. No adults stay in the room with the kids, anymore, because adults can do bad things to kids, but kids don't have supervision then. So anyway, so we were in the middle of Argentina, and my mom and I ran down there. I went and looked back. This was 4 or 5. I went back and looked at my journal because I had written everything down. And I wrote in there that he was purple and blue from the chest up, and he was not responding. And so my mom and I ran down there, and the youth pastor. And I was holding his neck because when you hang yourself, you can break your neck and things like that. So I was holding C-spine immobilization, and my mom and the youth pastor and everybody just started praying. And as soon as they started praying, the color started coming back, and he started waking up. And then just as they prayed, the circulation came back, and he started getting sensation in his feet and his hands and everything. And it took an hour for EMS to get there. And I remember when they finally got there, Brittany, this is just disgraceful. They did not have a C-spine immobilization or a backboard on their ambulance. I had to send them to get another one. And then I ended up in the emergency room, which was more like a jail cell, which actually didn't have any monitoring equipment of any kind. And I was left with this unstable, medically unstable and emotionally unstable teenager by myself in the emergency room with him all night. And that was tough. But as I read through the journal, I'm so thankful my mom was there, because she sat by his bed and she prayed and she read scripture. I had nothing left. I was exhausted. And then as I was reading through the journal, we were staying in a dormitory, because it was a college, a ministry college, for Hispanic people. And 2 of the university kids came by and knocked on the door, and they brought games and stuff, and these boys said, "We will stay up with him tonight. We'll take turns so that you guys can sleep." And I also read that we had to get an emergency trip back to the U.S., and we had to get a doctor's note saying he was stable. Now, he looked horrible. I cannot describe to you what he looked like. It's called petechiae. It's all your blood vessels bursted from the chest up, and he looked horrible, and his eyes were swollen almost shut. And nobody was going to let us on a flight, So we had to the missionary got us in with a psychiatrist at 10 p.m. at night. And she wrote us a prescription for a sedative to help him travel. And I wrote in there that when I called my husband and told him what had happened, he was crying, and he was stressed out because I'm in Argentina and I have to make a 10-hour flight with an unstable kid but the kid that the university student that took us to the airport, his name was Esteban. And I wrote in my journal that he, the whole way to the airport, told Travis his story of deliverance from depression. And he wasn't supposed to be the one to take us to the airport. The missionary was going to, but then the missionary had some kind of an appointment. And so I was just translating the whole time the story of how this kid was delivered from depression. And I will say, after we got back and we got him like in inpatient treatment, he was in inpatient treatment a long time. And we never permitted him to come back and live with us again because it wasn't safe for him or me or for our kids. But he is our son, and he'll always be our son. And he lives in a group home now, and he still calls us family, and he's very stable now. He's 34. He has a job. He has a car, and he's functioning really well. But it was a long road. So go to the next photo. So then the other big thing that we did was start Haven Acres. And this was, so we got that Loop Road property, remember, November of 2011. And we were in church, and the pastor was speaking about having a vision big enough it would take God to do it. And I was thinking, we just got this hobby farm for our kids, and that has no eternal value whatsoever. Like, and on the way home, I said to Jason, like, did you get anything out of that? And he said, we're supposed to start a youth ranch. And I'm like, oh my word, I got the same exact thing. We never owned a horse. I took lessons in first grade, didn't you remember? I'm a nurse, and he's a financial advisor. We are not equipped to start a nonprofit and start a horse ranch. And so we started a horse ranch. And so this is us. Actually, Brittany took this photo because she saw us. She saw us on TV. We're like, we had to ask the city of Burnsville for permission to use our property for a public use or whatever. So anyway, but when God asks you to do something, I want you to hear me very clearly. If God asks you to do something, he will provide for every single thing you need to do it. If you step out on your own and do something, you're on your own. I mean, like, you may not have everything you need to do it. But if God tells you to do it, and in this case, he spoke it to my husband and I at the same time, and we'd never talked about that because we did not own any horses. And when we went through all the stuff with Travis, I was like, this mental health system is broken. Something needs to be done about it, but I didn't know what I could do about it. And it was just like God lined up all these pieces. And if God called you to do it, he will give you everything you need to do it. He's given us every single volunteer. Holly's here tonight. She's my assistant. She works 20 hours a week for me now. And he provided every single dollar, everything. So this is us petitioning the city of Burnsville to use our little 6-acre place. Okay, go to the next slide. This was our first group of volunteers. Now they look powerful. And we only had the first year we only had 8 kids. So we got this idea in November of 2011. We purchased the horse that was the 2 horses that were being boarded on our property, and then we literally started Haven Acres right away. So skip through the next couple photos. We'll see the next. This is how we started. We had a van. We did not have a truck. We did not have a trailer. And we would have the farmer put one round bale in the back of our trailer of our van. I mean, he laughed every time we came there with our minivan and our little 8x8 trailer. He'd put one round bale in there, and then we'd park it at the top of the hill and roll it out. And then we had to physically move it. But anyway, okay, go to the next one. So this was 2015-ish. We'd grown to have 40 kids a week. It's all free of charge. It's a mentorship program for kids, one-on-one, at-risk youth. Okay, go to the next one. And then 2017, we needed to expand because we could not get any bigger. We could not grow on that 6 acres, so God gave us a 14-acre property in Hampton. Okay, go to the next one. And then right before COVID, in January of 2020, these people came to our ranch, and there was a 99-year-old woman that was on hospice in the nursing home, and she needed someplace to give her money, and she didn't have any family that was living. And she wanted to do something with horses and kids. And so they came out and visited our ranch November of 2019. I didn't hear anything from them again until January of 2020. They came out, handed us a check for $400,000, and COVID happened 2 months later. So while we were on stay-at-home orders, we built a barn that had bathrooms, that had a meeting room for the volunteers, that had an office for me and Holly. We were meeting in my dining room. We had porta potties. People were in and out of our house all the time because we didn't have place to keep ministry separate from our home. And we re-fenced the whole entire property. And go to the next photo. We also bought a trailer, which we'd never had a horse trailer. We'd been doing this for a long time. And the people in the nursing home, in the Farmington nursing home, had not been able to leave their rooms for 2 months. So we took horses to the windows. Go to the next one. And then all the kids who'd registered to be in the program, when it was their birthday, we brought the horses to their house. So we took our trailer and we went to the kids' houses with our horses. Okay, go to the next. So this is our last hard thing. I am totally out of time. But in December of 2021, we thought we were done having kids, and I was looking at Facebook. Facebook could be bad for you. And I saw a picture of a 15-year-old Colombian boy on there, and one of my friends that used to go to this church, but she lives in South Carolina now, she posted and said, this kid needs a family, and he wasn't able to be hosted in the U.S. because of COVID. He was supposed to come, but then it got canceled because of COVID. And I cannot explain to you what happened. I saw his photo. I'm like, oh, my word, he is supposed to be in our family. So I just brought it up at dinner that night. I was just like nonchalantly, so how does everybody feel about adopting a 15-year-old kid from Colombia? And my husband was like, what? But everyone was like on board with it, like everybody. And so I called the lady to get information about him. And she said, the first question I have for you is, do you have any experience with traumatized kids? And I said, well, actually, I do. And I know how badly this can go because I've done this before. But I knew that we were supposed to do this. And so I said, I said, I am very organized. She said, I don't know if you'll have time. He ages out in 7 months, and nobody can get an adoption done in 7 months. And I said, I'm very organized. I will get on the paperwork right away. And so she said, okay. So I started the paperwork. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, and I started the paperwork. And it's another one of those things that if God tells you to do it, He'll line it all up. He lined up every single detail. Jason's grandma died. She gave us some inheritance money. It paid for almost the whole entire adoption. This happened in December, which was exactly my off season. Like if this happened in the summer, there's no way I could do this. I have way too much stuff to do for Haven Acres. It was just everything. And the other main concern you have with kids from trauma is whether or not they'll actually be able to attach, and bond. And he has attached and bonded beautifully with our family. He is 17. His name's Alex. He's super, super funny. Like, he's really fun, and the kids love him. He's just fit in really perfect. But I just want to encourage you. 1 Thessalonians 5:24 says, faithful and absolutely trustworthy is he who is calling you, and he will do it. He will fulfill his call by making you holy, guarding you, watching over you, and protecting you as his own. And Isaiah 25:1 says, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise and give thanks to your name, for you have done miraculous things, plans formed long, long ago with perfect faithfulness. So God, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you have done. And this is really just a glimpse of all the ways you've been faithful. You've been so faithful to us. God, I thank you that your faithfulness reaches even to the heavens. God, I thank you that you never fail. Not one word of your promises ever fails. God, I thank you that you're the same today as you were yesterday, as you will be forever. God, I thank you that you created the heavens and the earth with your great power in your outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. So God, I just pray over these ladies tonight that whatever they might be facing, God, whatever miracle they might need, I ask, Holy Spirit, that you would supernaturally step in and provide. Where there's financial need, where there's relationships that need to be restored, God, where there's addiction, God, I pray, where there's physical illness that needs to be healed. God, I thank you that you are more than enough. And God, I pray that you would demonstrate for these women, God, that you are all sufficient, and that when they don't have anything left, God, they can look to you. In Jesus' name.